So the afternoon session is being chaired by Dr. Tanya Hoare from Zebra Swifts, Community Swifts in the UK. And I've known Tanya actually since the Cambridge conference and was really struck by her talk about the Swifts that nest at her house. She's got built-in boxes, and her story of the Swift that went into its nest box, the wrong nest box with nesting material. So it went into the nest box with a feather, looked around and went, oh dear, I'm in the wrong house, and flew out again and flew back in again. And I've never forgotten that story, Tanya. So I'm going to hand you over to Tanya, and Tanya's going to chair the afternoon session. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back at an international conference and to see so many old faces. But please don't take that too literally, because the first one we went to was in Berlin, organized by Ulrich, and that was the year that Suzanne Ackerson presented her first geolocator study of the migration of the common swift. So that was back in 2012. And we go from strength to strength. And what is great is to see a lot of young people here as well, because you are our future. And as I was sitting here, just at the tables all in front of you, is this lovely little booklet that Linda has produced. And it's based on the one that Action for Swifts produced earlier. And it says, "We are Swifts, we are in trouble." And I was once giving a talk to primary school children, and this little lad put his hand up and he said, "Please, miss, what have they done?" So anyway, it's time to introduce our speakers. And unfortunately, one of our speakers can't make it this afternoon. Jacques Lesser, he's had travel problems, I think, has Linda already said this? And so the final session in the afternoon, there'll just be 2 speakers, but hopefully plenty of time for questions. And our first speaker today is Diane Yorganson-Quinn, who's going to update us on Audubon's Vaux's Happening Swift project. And its aim is to save the chimneys that the Vauxes roost in along their migration along the Pacific Flyway from the Yukon right down to Guatemala. And I think the title is today, Mexico Takes Us to 30 Million. Now, although Diane's background, her education is in maths and chemistry, she's also a master birder. Although she started this project as a Swift tourist, she now manages the multi-program observation of all these chimneys. And in addition, she's seen all the world's species of avocets and flamingos, as well as 7 total eclipses of the sun. So welcome, Diane.
Okay, can you hear me okay? No? Can you hear me now? Am I audible? Okay. Okay, Mexico takes us over 30 million. You're going to find out what that means in a minute. In the meantime, these little babies, their nest fell out of their chimney, and they're in rehab, and they'll be ready to release right when the Vaux's Swifts are migrating again, and they'll hear the noises, and they'll be accepted into the flock. It'll be a happy ending. Okay. Okay, this presentation is half by me and half by Larry Schwitters, who started the Vaux's Happening. Larry Schwitters started this as a single person, and he's still an all-volunteer group. He's got 100 people now monitoring Swifts. And as what we do, why we exist. The project's 20 years old now, and Larry just received a great award from the National Audubon Society. Considering that Vaux's Swifts are only on the Pacific Flyway, this is pretty good. He started it all by himself. He still runs it all by himself. We do not take government subsidies. You probably saw these posters back there. You think they're alike? They're not alike. Migration has changed quite a lot. You'll see on the new one, there's a tree at the top, and there's a great big thing in Mexico at the bottom that you haven't seen before. But the worst thing is JBLM has been knocked off the list. JBLM is Joint Base Lewis McChord Military Base, and this is the ones that this is my job, and I'm out of a job. The Swifts have left JBLM. I had 4 to 6 chimneys. I had 25 volunteers monitoring them. We're all out of a job. Anyway, this is another one of the chimneys at JBLM. Oh, no, this is the same one. They were going to demolish it. We did stop them, but now they probably will. This is a big gap on 2014. It dropped radically. We saw that there was a clean out at the bottom of the chimney that had come loose, the cover. And when we tightened it up again, the Swifts came back the next year. They don't like a breeze. This is another chimney on JBLM, which was very successful. And the Army notified us that they were going to tear it down. Well, we got a writing campaign up and some publicity, and they decided, well, we're still going to tear down the building, and they did, but they left the chimney thinking they were doing us a big service, but the Swifts hate the lone chimney. Okay, so what I'm going to do once I can't go to JBLM anymore, I'm looking for a tree. I've seen 32 different chimneys down the coast of Washington and Oregon and California, but I've never seen Vaux's go in a tree, which is their traditional, a hollow tree that's been struck by lightning. I've never seen that, but there was a redwood. Okay, so yes, there was a redwood, and I was making plans to go down there, and they quit going there. You see this old tree that's rotting, and apparently it rotted down enough that they didn't like it anymore. It was only active for 5 years that we know of, but maybe a lot longer before then. Okay, we found a new tree, and it's near me. I was so happy until the fire started. The famous Bear Gulch fire in the Olympic National Park started in July 2025. It lasted 4 months. That's the entire fall migration period. They're still not allowing people in there because they still need to clean it up more. The survival, though, we worked with a researcher who helped us make the trees survive. They used sprinklers, protective coverings, and got rid of the understory. And this is her, and she's very, very wonderful. She keeps us in touch. She's been doing some counts until now, which is how we know how many Swifts. And she's hopeful that she'll be able to take people in. The general public won't be able to go in, but she's going to take Larry and I in this fall, hopefully. Okay, you know that they roost and they nest in hollow trees and chimneys. Look at this shot. We're looking straight down the chimney. The Swift is sitting on a nest. And they're cute, yes. They can hang, but they can't perch. You know that about pretty much all Swifts. They nest in chimneys as well as hollow trees. A chimney will have only one nest. Even though they go in huge groups when they're migrating in roosts, they do not nest colonially. This is a close look at a Swift nest. It's attached to the side of the chimney with saliva. Okay, Swift feathers are constructed to keep them cool when they move, but they're going to lose a lot of heat in the chimney unless they snuggle up. How's that for snuggling up? They even will, if it's a crowded chimney, they'll even perch on top of each other, and they're fine with it. They're very fine when they're in their roosting group. Okay, the other thing is it has to be warm in there too. So Larry puts temperature loggers in 6 roost chimneys and a couple of trees, and there's one that he's dropping down this chimney. And here's what we found out. It gets cold outside. It does not get that cold inside, especially when you're snuggling. Okay, here's another PVC temperature recorder going down a different chimney. Okay, another thing we have recently found out is that some swifts stay all summer, which is when they're supposed to be going to their nesting, and or continue to go north. But some do stay. We think they're failed breeders or maybe some kind of bachelor group. When we started Vaux's happening, we only had 2 major swift roost sites. The Sumas Old Customs House, right on the Canadian border, had 1 capped chimney and 1 open chimney. Well, one day they realized that there was something going in that chimney, and they capped it so it's out. The Monroe Wagner Elementary School in Monroe, Washington, this is Larry's favorite chimney where he started his deal. They wanted to tear the chimney down because of the earthquake problem and with school kids. So, started a festival, got lots of publicity, lots of newspaper, lots of TV, lots of people came. It was a big hit. Monroe, Washington actually adopted the Vaux's swift as their official city bird. So this is how we got the chimney saved. We raised a lot of money, but we did a lot of publicity. So the chimney is saved. What does Larry want to do? Well, he loves to go up a ladder. So he put the ladder up and he put a chimney in. Okay, this is what it looks like in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. They do not appear to sleep. Obviously they are somewhat, but they chatter all night. They chatter all day in the air. They chatter all night. When they enter a chimney, their chatter is probably what keeps them from bumping into each other. They never sleep. And this is the outside of the chimney, the same chimney. And you can see the swifts going in. So we had 2 chimneys on the Monroe chimney, 2 cameras. Anyway, it goes on and on. It goes to infrared, black and white soon, but you don't need to see that. I'm trying to talk fast. Okay, with the camera watching the roost 24/7, we discovered something horrible in the morning. Most of our counters are there in the evening. They're not there in the morning. For one thing, we don't know when they're going to come out. It's not very predictable. So in the morning, something happened. That can't go on. Larry tried all kinds of things at the top of the chimney to discourage. This is the only thing they will not. But Larry had to take it up on a ladder again. He seems to love to go up ladders, and he's in his 80s, so I hope he stops soon. Okay, you know we have the 4 species of swifts in North America, completely different from yours. The Vaux's swift on the left is possibly the smallest swift in the northern hemisphere. It's about 4.5 inches long. The chimney swift on the right is just slightly larger, and the other 2 are larger. So we have a very small bird. All of these species are good at catching bugs, and they get lift on both the up and down stroke. And this will make it not sound so weird that their closest family, their closest relatives are hummingbirds. Think about that. Okay, how do you tell them apart? Well, it's really pretty hard, except where are you? They're in a completely different part of the country. And you see the dark color for the chimney swift range. There's a lot more of them. It's not a worrisome species. And you can see why the Vaux's swift need to have some research done on them, which we're doing, because there's a lot fewer of them and they're a lot limited in their nesting areas. Their winter range is even more different. The chimney swifts go to South America Vaux's swift go to Mexico and Central America. Okay, there are 7 subspecies. Only one migrates. So if you look at the very top part of the orange, you will see how far north Vaux's swift will nest. We had a record near the Yukon. So there's more up there, but nobody lives up there who's counting. Okay, so we don't need to look at that. Lots of projects. Vaux's Swift has lots of projects. One of them is 4 International Swift Conference presentations. This is actually the 5th. So, and you can see we've done all kinds of things. We put up fake towers. They didn't work. They work for chimney swifts. They do not work for Vaux's Swift. We've put video cameras in a Detroit smokestack. We put a radio transmitter to 6 swifts. You'll see about that. And that's this. In Yakima, Washington, which is one of the furthest east chimneys, it's in the center part of Washington. We put a screen up there to catch a few swifts. We caught a few swifts. Oh yeah, lots of lice. Okay, we had 6 swifts that we tagged with transmitters. You can see the antenna coming out the back of this bird. There are 6 of them. We let them go. And this is in Yakima, Washington, straight south, Roseburg, Oregon. They caught 2 of those on the transmitters. The other 4 are never seen. But both the radio people and the bird people picked them up. So, wow, 2. Okay, now Larry's getting restless, so he decided to go look at chimney swifts. He's in Detroit here. Look at that huge chimney. Yes, he's climbing it. Yep, you know why, don't you? Yeah, there he is coming down in the rain. He put the camera there. You can see the camera on the right hanging down. So this is what he saw right away. It was still light outside, but later on at night when it turned to infrared, lots more swifts. Okay, meanwhile, back in the Northwest, the newly reopened Rainier, Oregon chimney, they took the grate off, and all of a sudden it had thousands and thousands of swifts, and I do think that this is where my JBLM swifts are going instead. So this is on the Columbia River. They really hit it anyway. The counters are on a hillside looking over at the chimney. You can see the swifts in the air. Okay, so now he's climbing that chimney. Yep, he's going to put a camera in. There he is putting the camera in, and it works. And later on, the birds came, and we can see them on the Vaux's Swift website anytime we want. Okay, now this is where we get the 30 million. The 30 million is not a census. It's how many sightings. So each of those swifts is probably counted more than once. So it's 30. It looks like it's 29 million, but that was at the end of last year. We've already had the count go up this year, and it's 30 million. So, however you want to know the real population, that's a little bit harder. It takes some calculations, and you have to kind of work into the calculations how many nights each swift would stay in a chimney. And different chimneys are different, and the weather makes a difference. Anyway, there's many ways to do it, and Larry's best number right now is 600,000 population. It's not going up, it's not going down. All right, but we do know they go south of the border. How are we going to get there? Okay, if you see the place, the dotted line over the purple area, we're looking right there. And we got some eBird reports, but these eBird reports are not roosting chimneys. They're just reports of somebody saw a swift. So we need to check out some of those, though. So we need to send somebody down there, and we sent Kevin Lucas from Yakima. He got his shots and passports, and he went down to look at those sites near Mexico City. And he came up bust. Rats and bats. So those didn't work too well, but Kevin did see 2 swifts in Mexico. So that didn't work. All right, we got more spots. Orizaba, Mexico, though, that did work. There is a good swift chimney there. Axel and his wife have been counting there, and they have some pretty good numbers. And if you look at their numbers, look at the trough at the bottom. This shows that they are the migrating swifts, not the other 6 swifts that don't migrate. And the reason that you don't see them in the summer is because that's when they're up here. Getting a little tech help here. Can anybody see that? Okay, we're still getting some tech help here. So the Orizaba swifts, they show 0 in May through September, which is the exact same time period that we have swifts up here. So that shows that they are the migrating swifts that we get, not the 6. Okay, there, you see that? Okay, you see that trough? That's when they're up where we live, not in Mexico. Okay, thanks, guys. Okay, so we went to Guatemala. We heard about a great chimney there. Look at that volcano in the bottom right-hand spot. This is what their swift chimney looks like. It's really old and not used right now except by swifts. Except, guess what? Not even by swifts, because that volcano erupted and the swifts are gone. Still, yes. Okay, then we found this set of 2 chimneys at a very old sugarcane refinery in Huacalco, Mexico. These chimneys look like heck. They're concrete, they're not brick. They're held up only by their rebar, otherwise they'd fall down. Okay, we got to get somebody to go there to document the numbers. We found a young lady, she took the bus. And here she is, Judith. We were wondering if she'd come back again after this. But she did, and she's come back lots and lots of times. She's become a regular counter, and it's just, we're very happy to have a local down there. Now you can see that rebar is a problem. She caught this swift off the ground. It had bounced off the rebar. It didn't get hurt. She was able to pick it up and threw it in the air, and it joined the other swifts. Then she counted 100,000 more. These guys keep hitting the rebar, but we can't do anything about that. If we complain at all to anyone, they'll tear those chimneys down, and that won't be doing anybody a favor. Okay, it's really a good one. So, we have really 2 massive sets of chimneys now in the Western Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere has 2 massive, you'll hear from Michael Helm later on this Friday, I think, and he'll tell you about the one in Northern California, and this is the other one. It's probably even bigger. Those 2 do a total. They take care of most of our swifts. Okay, so then we have Kashmir Wolf. Another counter has been there. He's estimated 17 minutes, approximately 60 swifts per second. Entire sky was coated. Then the land guard there mentioned that the other chimney is also sometimes used because they need 2 because there's so many. Okay, there's still a few swift potentials around that area. So we had to send somebody. We found Oscar. Oscar was very happy to do it. He borrowed his aunt's car, and he has some high-end camera equipment. So he was going around to all those sites, but he got mugged. So his car and his camera were stolen. Luckily, he was not hurt badly. 10 days later, he's back on the job, but with no camera. But you remember that guy? Oh yeah, right. No lasting. The auto insurance paid. Okay, so Kevin, remember that guy up in Yakima who got 0 and 0 rats and bats? Well, he had expensive camera equipment, and he gave it to Oscar. I'll tell you, Swift people are the best people. Okay, this is about the finale here. Time to focus on Huacalco ex Hacienda. Judith is there, and here we go. Please look at this for a while and see if you are not totally amazed. You'll hear some talking in the background, but it's all in Spanish. It's getting dark. They're still coming. Huge group coming in from the right now. This goes on for hours. They can't all go in at once. This is why I count Swifts. It's just takes your breath away. Okay, that's it.
Well, thank you, Diane. And I must say, the spectacle of these Swifts is something I would really love to see one of these days. Now, our second speaker this afternoon is Chris Huxley, who is an ecologist and a zoologist, now based in County Mayo, although he has worked in 50 countries worldwide. And he's also, among other things, an expert on Loch Carra, only 8 miles away from here, which is the finest example of a marl lake in Western Europe. And what I didn't know until this morning is that despite that and all his work on swifts, most of his career, he spent on elephants and rhinos. Anyway, Chris and Linda have worked extremely hard leading the campaign to increase the swift population in Mayo. And today he's going to talk about where do all these recruits come from. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Tanya. I was absolutely staggered by the videos that we just seen and the difficulty of counting numbers of birds like that. And it reminded me that here we quite often count the starling murmuration on Loch Carra in the autumn, and the swallow roost. We have up to 30,000 swallows in a reed bed roost on Loch Carra. And people ask me, how on earth do you count them? And I always give them the same reply. It's very easy. You count the legs and divide by 2. It's wonderful to see so many Swifties gathered here in the far west of Ireland, in County Mayo. And for Linda and myself, it's a huge reward to have you all here, to see what we have done, but also to hear from each other what everybody else has been doing. I was listening very carefully to Lyndon's talk this morning, and I was fascinated when he commented how little we know about what happens to sub-adult swifts when they leave the nest. And that really fits in quite nicely with what I want to talk about. Unlike most of the speakers here, I'm not going to try and give answers. I'm going to ask questions, because the state we're at with Swift research here, we're at a blockage, if you like, there's a major question that has not been answered sorry, in any way, and that is, where do our new birds come from? We know remarkably little about the population dynamics of the common swift. We know quite a lot about its breeding biology. We know something about the feeding biology. But we actually don't have an awful lot of good, solid data about, thanks very much, Declan, about the population dynamics. Obtaining data on mortality rates is problematic. There are very few ringing recoveries, which is the standard way of calculating mortality rates. And the data that we have on fledging comes primarily from nest box projects. We know very little indeed about what happens to swifts that are breeding in what we call natural or traditional sites. We noticed here in Mayo that new nest box colonies often grow faster than expected. So I've put together a few points to illustrate what I see as the main question that needs to be addressing now, which is, where do our birds come from? A little bit of background. The two red arrows illustrate the two colonies that we know most about. The bottom red arrow is Castle Bar here, and you've all seen the colony out in the courtyard here, 18 nest boxes with up to about a dozen pairs breeding in there. And the top red arrow is the location of Maguire's Bridge colony, John Young's private residence, which is the most staggering private residence I've ever seen. You can't see the house because there are swift boxes, there are house martin boxes, house martin nests, there are bee boxes, there are bat boxes all over the walls. And his attic is absolutely full of recording equipment and whiteboards where he records everything. So we have two colonies that we know an awful lot about. And we also know something about the County Mayo population, if I can call it a population. I'll come back to that in a minute. Because in 2024, Linda organised a county-wide survey with a team of wonderful volunteers to try and carry out a comprehensive survey of the known nest sites. And that came up with a total of 308 occupied nests, of which 38% were in the new nest box projects that have all been set up since 2012. So what happened with those two colonies for the first 7 years? I've separated the first 7 years because these are the years of data that Jarek had for doing his master's thesis. You can see that both colonies started off with a very small number of pairs, not at all surprising. Castle Bar with 2 pairs and Maguire's Bridge with 3. But then over the next 6 years, things changed between the two colonies. In Castle Bar, it increased by more or less 1 pair a year, whereas in Maguire's Bridge, it went up very much faster. We don't know why, but I do know one of the reasons why that was happening was because of the way in which the projects were managed, if you like. So we've got growth in both colonies right from the very start, but, and I'll come back to this in a moment, that growth is greater than is possible from a population unless it is breeding at least 1.8 chicks per pair successfully every year. So we thought we'd look at that. Before we do that, a little bit about mortality and recruitment rates. adult mortality is probably around 17%. There's quite a lot of studies that have looked at this, and they all come out between 15 and 20%. So I've used, for the purposes of my calculations, I've used 17%. Juvenile mortality is much more difficult to estimate, and also much more variable, particularly because it depends how long you call it a juvenile or a sub-adult. So I've taken the best average figures I can get, and that is that 80% of them die before they breed. Now, most people will tell you that swifts don't breed until they're 2 years old, or 3 years old, or 4 years old, which complicates the issue. So I have used 2 years as being the age of first breeding. And from that, I can calculate, and I did this calculation first on the back of an envelope with a bit of pencil, that in order to sustain a population, not a colony, a population, the average number of chicks raised per pair has to be 1.8 or more. The total young fledged at Castlebar in the first 7 years was 1.4. So way below what was needed to sustain the population that colony is part of. Whereas in Maguire's Bridge, it was 2.3, remarkably higher. So first question is why? Well, part of the reason for that is because that colony, if eggs get knocked out of a nest, John nips up to the box and puts the egg back in the nest. So he didn't suffer the great losses that we watched in Castlebar, where our early breeders were all incredibly clumsy and kicking eggs and chicks out of the nest. But even at 2.3 per pair, Maguire's Bridge was still acting as what we call a sink for the first 4 years. In other words, it was consuming more new birds than it was producing. So a quick word on sinks and sources. Because we know that only a small proportion of young birds return to their natal colony, we have to look at data from a wider population if we can. If a population of swifts that have separate colonies don't produce sufficient fledged young to maintain their numbers, then we call that a sink. So in other words, the continued existence of that population is dependent on birds coming in from somewhere else, which again raises the question of what is a population. On the other side, colonies that are producing a surplus are called sources. They're the ones that are producing young birds that can go off and add to the population elsewhere. This is a proper representation of what I scribbled on the back of an envelope, and I just decided, okay, what happens if we start with 100 birds, 50 pairs of birds, and I used different figures for the number of young that they fledged each year. And what you can see is that in the first year that we look at, there are 83 adults left because 17% mortality, and there are 18 young ones that come in from year 0, which is this year here. So they're the 2-year-olds. And if you continue that calculation all the way down, you can see that at 1.8 per pair, the population remains more or less stable. So that, for me, that's a really important figure, because that tells us that's what we need to be producing to sustain our populations. So what happened in the long term in Castlebar? Over the longer period, from 2014 right through to last year, you can see that with the one exception of the first year, when we had 2 chicks per pair, we just had 2 pairs, 2 chicks each, with that exception, for the first 7 years, recruitment was very low. And then from 2021 onwards, it's got up to roughly the level where the population is, its part of the population is at a sustainable level. So, some conclusions that I would draw from this. First of all, population increase in the common swift can only be very slow. So when we see a colony that is increasing, even at the relatively slow rate of Castle Bar, but the incredibly fast rate of Maguire's Bridge, we know that the local population is being enhanced in some way. And together with the fact that the population of Ireland as a whole is known to have been decreasing, we become immediately suspicious. But where are these birds coming from? How are we getting such rapid growth? And to make the situation even more dramatic, although the Castle Bar growth was nowhere near as fast as Maguire's Bridge, going up from 2 to 12 in all those years, what happened round about here was that the colony in the swimming pool suddenly appeared and became populated with swifts. So we had enormous growth of a new colony 200 meters from this colony here. So where on earth are all these swifts coming from? Relatively rapid increase in a local population or a colony can only be a result of immigration. The birds must be coming in from somewhere else, and the overall decline in Ireland's populations suggests that these local increases that we are observing derive from immigration to Ireland rather than immigration from within Ireland. And when a new colony arises, I think it will be a sink for several years. The same pattern, if you do the calculations of the production and the increase in the colony size, they're not producing enough for the first few years to sustain a population. This, to my mind, from the conservation point of view, is really important, because what it means is if you're setting up a colony and you're only putting up 3 boxes or 4 boxes or something, then it's quite possible that that colony will take a very long time and may never contribute to the population as a whole. So big projects are much more likely to be useful for conservation in the long run. What explanations are there for what we've observed here? Well, firstly, there is the possibility that the mortality rates are lower than I've suggested. They're all from published literature, the figures that I've used. But we've got no real idea of what the mortality rate in Ireland is and if it's remarkably different. I doubt if it is different, so I personally don't think that that's a good explanation. The second explanation is that the two colonies we've studied, the recruits for those have come from elsewhere within Ireland. In the case of Maguire's Bridge, that is conceivable because there are known to be quite big population of swifts in Northern Ireland compared with here. But for us here in Castle Bar, that is not the case. And the third possible explanation is that there is significant immigration from Britain and or Europe. And that's the explanation that I favour, but we have no real evidence for it. So the common swift may exist as one or more metapopulations. A metapopulation, for those of you who aren't ecologists or scientists, a metapopulation is a population of animals that exists in effect as a whole series of what appear to be isolated populations, but they're actually all interconnected. And I think that that is something that we really need to look at much more carefully to find out where on earth all our new recruits are coming from. So from all of this, my hypothesis would be that we have young, non-breeding swifts that roam over huge distances, exploring and prospecting for new colonies, new nest sites, new areas to breed in. And the evidence for that is anecdotal and a bit flimsy, but we have observed what we think is exactly that happening, at least within Ireland, where we have noticed that very often a colony will be visited by a large group of bangers, young birds, and there'll be screaming parties for a day or for 3 days or maybe a week, and then they go away. We lose them altogether. We've seen that happening here in Castlebar, we've seen it happening in Crossmolina and in Charlestown. So I think that the next big question is to find out something about what's going on with the population ecology of the swift in the British Isles and in Europe to see how it all fits together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That was fascinating. I'm beginning to wonder if some of our own colony of chicks are coming over to you, especially thinking of how many insects you have over here. Our next speaker I'd like to welcome is a good friend of mine from the north of England, Louise Bentley. And she's dedicated her life to caring for swifts once she retired from the UK police force. And is a dedicated carer. Her talk is going to be Caring for Swifts, Challenges and Opportunities. She's one of the foremost rehabilitators in the UK, and together with Linda Jenkinson from Leeds Swifts, has written an authoritative guide on all aspects of swift care. And I've had the benefit of some training from Louise in rehabbing, and I know for certain sure what a skill it takes to look after these birds. And yet somehow she still manages to pursue her outdoor pursuits in cycling and running and other things in the outdoors.
Only after the birds have fledged.
And even Louise once visited us, and I believe that when you cycle around, you've had some rehab birds in the basket of your bicycle. No?
No, that's a myth. That's
Sorry,
not true.
That's a myth. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Tanya. Okay. Okay. Can you all hear me okay? Can you all hear me? Yeah, thumbs up. Excellent. Thank you. So, yeah, challenges and opportunities. I'm quite new to rehabbing, really. I only started in 2020. But nonetheless, I still think, it's good to share the journey of a newer swift rehabber, which is myself. Now, in 2016, I set up Bolton and Bury Swifts, a conservation project such as many of you will run back home, concerned with finding out where our colonies were, surveying, and I did used to like going out in the summer on my bike, counting swifts around the colonies, but I no longer am able to do that. I absolutely had no intention of becoming a swift rehabber. I was very happy helping my hubby and volunteers putting boxes up and doing the surveys. However, people would find grounded swifts and ask me where to send them. And it was only when I discovered that our local bird rescue was feeding swifts mincemeat that I felt compelled to have to start reading up on this Swift rehab lark, which I knew was very complex and a very difficult thing to do, and it really wasn't a road that I wanted to go down at all. However, I felt I had no choice, and I found it very difficult at first. It was a challenging journey. This is one of my Swiftlets. But we started in 2020, and for the last few years, I've been taking in up to 70 Swifts each summer, and it's given me great joy to be able to release many healthy birds back to the skies. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, but I'll get there. I'll get back on track. So dexterity is quite an important skill. That initial knack of learning how to open a swift's beak, and to really do it carefully and properly. That was my initial struggle, and I learned from reading a lot. But when you actually start doing it, it's a completely different ball game, isn't it? Reading the science and the research and the brilliant work of Henriette Fuse and Christine and Gillian Westray, all those people informed. I knew what, in theory, I should be doing, but I had a lot to learn. It was an uphill struggle. But I dedicated myself to getting better and doing it for the Swifts, because during my post-retirement, I was very lucky to be able to retire quite early, at 50. And I got into the conservation of swifts, and they've just brought me so much joy. So for me, it's been a huge reward, every swift that I'm able to release. So I wanted to, obviously, that was the little picture for perfecting my feeding technique. I want to obviously do everything as professionally as I can. So I am an associate member now of the British Wildlife Rehabilitation Council, and I adhere to their very high standards of welfare, of looking after wildlife, and continuous professional development with the BWRC. I'm also being approved by the RSPCA, which is the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty for Animals, as a swift and hirundine species-specific home rehabber. And not so easy for me to say, but I'm now registered with them too. And it's very important that I follow correct procedures and protocols, that have a good policy on euthanasia. It would be illegal to keep any bird in pain, suffering. If it needs to be euthanized, that is what has to happen. All swifts that I release must have the equal chance as their healthy wild counterparts of survival. So I am now part of a small network of dedicated swift rehabbers across the UK. This is just some of them, including across the UK and Ireland, including our Linda here as well. So this is just a few of us. But we're very much focusing on supporting each other, coming together in a positive way, collaboration, sharing some unusual and interesting cases in our WhatsApp group, and there's always unusual cases with swifts, as you might imagine. Now, Linda has put together the best of already existing information and protocols from the best people, from the best worldwide rehabbers, and I've mentioned Gillian Westray. A lot of this is her work, but brought together in one written manual that's easily accessible, and then we can share with other rescues and other rehabbers, and we've done it more as an introduction for new people as well. But you need a mentor, and that's where we are trying to provide mentors to people in the UK who want to take that step of being a swift rehabber. But it's a steep learning curve. Also, we have because that's quite a lengthy document. There's a lot of information in there. So we also have the quick A4 guide of the basic do's and don'ts to share with existing rescues, because sadly what we're finding is some of the basic mistakes are still being made. And I've also helped contribute to the quick guide to the essential steps for house martin rehabilitation, and I have looked after several house martins each year, and swallows as well. But in the main, I Swifts. So, and we have a wonderful resource like the Falco Negra Enrique Fuse website. And he spoke at the last, he spoke in Seville, which was amazing, and he's done his work on diet. And sadly, we're finding people are still not feeding the right diet. Perhaps not so much giving swifts mincemeat or cat food anymore, but a lot of the rescues have latched onto the fact that you can give them waxworms, and they're much easier to prepare than cricket. So there's an overfeeding of waxworms. So it's kind of those kind of things that we're trying to, gently push people in the right direction of what they should be doing. And the correct supplements daily are absolutely essential. So the challenge is, I've learned a lot. I've come a long way. I now feel, because I know what I'm doing with the swifts, I have a duty to them, and I'm very passionate about, giving up my summer of cycling and looking after the swifts instead. And it is a hard work, but a real joy. But trying to put ourselves out there a little bit more to see what other rescues are doing. Can they improve? Do they want to work with us? Do they want to join our group? And a lot of them are open to learning. But a lot of them are also dealing with mixed species, lots of different species, not just birds, but mammals too. So, it's been difficult for them to find the time to devote to swifts. Challenges of time and money. Well, I think I've already said about giving up your whole summer to look after the birds. But also, it's expensive. It probably costs an average of about €18 per swift per week. We're mainly feeding crickets, but we're mixed with other insects as well, and that are bred for the reptile pet trade. We've got easy availability of them, and the waxworms, but they're not cheap. Now, it doesn't make for the best advert for a job. Wanted, swift carer, must be resilient, passionate, a reliable person needed to provide 24/7 care, 7 days a week from May until September, no salary available. It's not the most enticing of adverts, is it? So wildlife rehabbers definitely do it for the love and not for the money. It's fair to say. Just a little message that I'd like to get out there is do support, find out where your local swift rehabber is, whether they're part of a larger rescue or just a single person home base like myself. Find out where they are, support them, but ask them, what are you feeding your swifts? What protocols do you follow? Have you looked at Enrique Fuse's website, for example? Now, Edward Mayo has for a long time held a list of swift rehabbers, specialists across the UK, with advice for finders of what to do with a swift, which is an absolutely brilliant resource, and also very helpfully even signposts to rescuers in other countries as well. But we've also got the huge growth in social media these days, and often the first thing that somebody will do if they find a swift on the ground is post a picture of the forlorn-looking bird on social media and say, what do I do with this? And then they will get an array of weird and wacky advice, and often thrown in the air and upstairs windows and all that kind of thing is mentioned, even though it could be a tiny chick, So Charlie Cuff, who set up the very popular All Things Swift Facebook page, which has now got 10,000 members, including worldwide members, has brought Swift lovers together. But Charlie now has the page Swift and Swallow SOS, coordinating rescues and supporting finders. And we've got Sarah here, who is a member of that team. So they've got a small, and Susan as well, a very small team of volunteers who are matching finders who go to social media with their nearest swift rehabbers. And if the finder is unable to get the swift to the rehabber, many of them are willing, some of them are not able or not willing, then there's also got a separate network of swift taxi volunteers. So it's an absolutely wonderful service, and trying to get that right information out there on social media to counter the poor information that sadly still exists. So this is just, since that Swift and Swallow SOS team has been going since 2022. They've dealt with 200 cases in their first year, then a little dip, and peaked at 480 cases last year. So that is a personal service, direct, having conversations with the finder and matching them with the Swift rehabber. Now, I get a lot of Swifts through this team, but also from elsewhere, also for people going to Edwards Page, and also a lot of other wildlife rescues, crucially, in the northwest of England now know that, oh, Louise Bentley does Swifts, ring her. Because, to be honest, a lot of the wildlife rescue centres who are dealing with multiple species, they don't really want to do Swifts because they're very time consuming. You can't just put a bowl of seed and water in with them, and they're expensive. So if they've got somebody concentrating on Swifts, they're very happy to pass them on. And that's consequently, I think, why the numbers that I'm dealing with have rose year on year to, say, about an average, been balanced off about 70 the past 3 years. Now, every good wildlife rehabber must be supported by a vet. You cannot do wildlife rehabilitation without working with a vet, because you will have animals that are in pain, that need medication. You might need x-rays, and if a Swift has been in a cat's mouth, it needs antibiotics quickly. Often you can't even see any injuries, but sepsis can hit really, really quick. Now, I've been very lucky to find Belinda, who's also a friend now and a member of Bolton and Bury Swifts, and she's given me invaluable advice and home visits to look at my birds, which is obviously worth its weight in gold. Now, just a little bit away from the actual rehabilitation of the birds, because I'm obviously looking at the wider picture of conservation, every grounded Swift that is brought to me presents a golden opportunity to rescue, to save and protect a colony going forward. Because if somebody finds a grounded Swift on their doorstep, then what have they got? Nesting Swifts, or their neighbours got nesting Swifts. And there might be several pairs of Swifts on that street or on that block of flats. So they all get a finder's pack. If a finder brings a bird to my door, I always bring them in. I show them my Swift sanctuary room and my Hirondine hotel room, and I want them to see that I'm doing my very best and the high standards that I adhere to looking after the birds, and I send them away with a colourful pack of leaflets to share with their neighbours, to put on their community WhatsApp group, to let everybody know we've got Swifts, aren't we lucky? I say to them, if you're ever planning any roof works, please get in touch with me. We can offer you free advice on how you can do those works sympathetically. If they've got any young people, they get a lovely soft toy Swift, of which Lynn has brought a selection of her handmade Swifts with us on our table over there, where there's a copy of the Swift rehab manual is as well. And if anybody wants to sign up to receive an email version of it, then please drop your email over on the desk there. And also one of our lovely Swift badges. So that has led on, indeed, to the conservation of some colonies, because there was a lady called Tina from Haslington who'd been watching these blackbirds screaming over her garden and the neighbours' gardens for the previous few years, absolutely loved them, didn't even know what they were. But when one chick fell on her doorstep, she brought it to me, and then she found out they were Swifts. So that was all well and good, and that chick fledged. It was about 2 years later that Tina rang me, absolutely distraught. The Housing Association are doing all the roofs. They're going to seal them all in. And she, bless her, she was even threatening to hire security to stop them giving her a new roof because she was so determined to keep her 2 pairs of Swifts and a couple of pairs of house sparrows as well. But thankfully, it didn't come to that. I was able to get a conversation going with the Housing Association. They put me onto the contractors, the roofers. This chap was the site supervisor, Aaron, absolutely superb. We got in, it was about 16 of the Action for Swift soffit boxes in the new soffits, and also about another dozen external Swift boxes. So really, really nice result. Oh, and it made the local press. Unfortunately, there's not a picture of Tina there. She was a bit camera shy. Another example, a couple of years ago, a young woman on her way home from work spots this swift chick, about 5 weeks old, skulking at the side of this building, this lovely old building that we have in Bury. It's actually a carpet shop. She brought the bird to me. It did really well, Totty from Tottington. But it was a few weeks later, I got a call from somebody telling me that there was scaffolding up on the building. I thought, oh no, I've not had a chance to go and speak with them yet. So I went round, spoke with the owners, told them about the Swift colony. They actually knew about the Swifts because they'd had them inside the building on occasion, and they took them outside and released them. They were really keen to save the colony, but they didn't really know what to do. So I spoke to their roofer, showed him all the holes. There was holes in stone, and there was under wooden soffits as well. They were really happy to keep all of those whilst replacing the roof. So another little success story. Now, got enough time to show you this video, which I absolutely love. So all creatures are individuals, and swifts are definitely no exception to that. Top left is the finder's photo. Now, that swift, I could tell from feather development, was about 15 days of age. However, wasn't much bigger than a hatchling, about 2 inches long and weighed a pitiful 9 grams. A lady living in Southport on a chilly June evening found the little swift who became Babs on her doorstep. One of my Swift taxi volunteers brought Babs to me. That's her on the scales, bottom left. The night that she was brought to me, weighing the 9 grams. I thought I'll be very surprised if this swift is still alive the following morning. But she was. She had the fighting spirit of Bolton's own Tyson Fury. He's a boxer, if you've not heard of him. And she went on not only to survive, but to thrive. The bird had clearly entered into torpor at some stage and took a little bit longer than most swifts. Obviously, had to very gradually fluid therapy and again get the weight on with Babs. See if this video will play. She was actually a very dark colour. I say she, I don't know if it's male or female, but actually a very dark coloured bird. And I've had this dark colouring with birds that have entered torpor before. I don't know if that's a coincidence. A little bit reluctant to go as well. I've got her in the binoculars. Yeah, I'm always equally, with every swift that goes, the thrill never ends, really. They're always exciting to release. Now, that's some of our group of rehabbers, and we're around the country. There are more of us, but as I say, we're very supportive of each other and improving our standards and sharing caseload. And finally, my last side is just remembering one of the most wonderful and expert and special rehabbers that we've ever had in the UK, and that was Judith Wakelam, who sadly is no longer with us. And she released probably many hundreds of healthy swifts back to the skies. And that's the end of my presentation. I think we're going to do a questions session.